Last time we worked on the API integration from the backend, and we did some code cleaning at the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this session on how we can make a database connection in this application and how we can make things work. So first of all, we need to set up the database. Okay. So right now you can see the services are just returning from a static content. So this is not the expected way. We need some things like a database or some place where we can get the values. Okay, so we'll do that. In order to do that, what we need to do is we need to get this database set up. I think in most of the applications with Node.js, they prefer databases like MongoDB, but it's not limited to MongoDB. You can use any SQL database of your choice. I personally like the Postgres for SQL, and for NoSQL, of course, Mongo is one of the popular choices. So we'll be covering MongoDB in this scenario, so you guys can have a look around it as well. So first thing is I need to get a database instance. So what I'll do is I'm actually going to use Docker to get my database up and running. So I will create a Docker compose file. It's like a service definition for Docker. So let me see what I can do I'm just going to copy and paste some of the Docker compose things, and I'll show you guys how I can work on these things later on. So these things I do not like even I do not have this at top of my mind. I just copy and paste from existing Docker compose file, so that makes things easy. Okay, should be a Docker compose file in here. Okay. Okay, this is the Docker compose content that I'm going to use. I'll be using few of the things like volumes and network. I'm going to name my version in here. So these are like completely optional. You can just skip these things if you want, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. So if you guys are interested, you guys can also do the same. SENG. These are course code, right? If I'm not mistaken. Now we find those things in the component, right? SENG. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a Docker compose with the version 3.0, and I'm creating a network. Network is just a Docker network and some volumes for containing Mongo files like database stuff. And I'm going to be using Mongo 6.0.3, which the reason is being that I have it in my local image, so I have used that. I'm going to connect this container, this service into this network. I'm going to connect the volume to this defined volume. And I'm going to open up the port 27017. That is like the default port for the Mongo MongoDB, and I can have initial root Mongo initial root password and username. So I'm going to give a username for password. Basically, do not spin up a database without a username or password. That is like considered the most unsecured way of doing coding. I have paid the consequences on these things, so you guys do not have to do that. Make sure you always have some random thing that's working out for you, and that's totally fine. Okay, so I'll call this super admin. This is the username, and I'll have a random password, something like this, and WE, something that's hackers will find a hard time to do, but this is not even secure. You can find a secure password, have a good strong password, use that. Okay, so now in order to run this Mongo in my machine, what I have to do is I have to go to the terminal. What's the terminal that I use? Okay, so I have this terminal. I put it in the apps Dilagro API. The reason behind I have put it in the Docker Compose file in the API is because it's a dependency for the API. Now all I have to do is Docker Compose up, and it is creating a database for me, and it is up and running. So we can check out later on whether it is working or not. So next thing we need to do is, since the database is up and running, we need to connect it from our application, and connection should be made using connection URL. So let me get the next documentation for Mongoose. Okay, so MongoDB is the database, and Mongoose is the most popular MongoDB client for Node.js. Okay, so it is like MongoDB kind of helps. Mongoose helps you to execute Mongo queries and everything from TypeScript or JavaScript perspective. So it's easy. You have other options as well. The TypeORM is a SQL, I don't know, SQL ORM solution. So most of this SQL projects I have used TypeORM, but I would not recommend TypeORM because most of the projects that MongoDB is using, you will find Mongoose. Okay. For SQL, of course, you can go with TypeORM. That's considered that is considered more commonly used, and it works since it is well tested. There are other SQL ORMs, if you like. You can have those things in here. So under technique, you will find databases, and you can look around the database incorporations on each and every settings. Right now, I'm going to use Mongoose. So I would need Nest.js, Mongoose, and Mongoose itself. So there are like wrappers around it. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to execute this in here. npm install, I might need to do a force installation if I remember correctly. I have a broken dependency section. So next thing I would need to do is I need to create the Mongoose module, which means I need to create the connection with these things. So right now, we are using the MongoDB root connection. So what we can do is we can connect to this, but if you do not know whether it is working or not, What we can do is we can use a plugin called MongoDB for VS Code. This is like the version I normally use. There are like other tools like Mongo Connect, if I'm not wrong. Mongo Connect, like those tools can be used to communicate with the database. But since we are all in VS Code as of now, we can use the VS Code to work with this. Okay, so you can create a connection by going here, and you can connect with the connection string or form advanced forms. So if you know the example, if you can see that in here, what is the database connection that we're going to be using in here. And if you do not know the exact connection, just open this form, and it will guide you most of the time. And you can see that it is a standalone. It's the local host is the host that we are running currently, since I have opened it to my machine, and the default port I have used, and the username and the password. If you guys can remember, I put in Docker Compose super admin as my username, and the password is something like this, and the authentication database, it's going to be the same. So if you hit connect, successfully connected to localhost, that means my connection is working. That means the database is running. So I don't have to worry about that. If I go back in here, now you can see the localhost 20. The same thing is here, but I will I'll rename this connection, so I'm not config CNG, something like that. So I know this is I can have multiple databases connections. So I'll make sure when I Docker Compose up, and the connection that I'm looking for is a CNG, because other databases have different username and passwords. So in this case, to avoid confusion, what I'll do is I will just have it like that. So I think dependencies are like giving some issues, but I'm going to ignore it for now. But as I mentioned, in a production, you just have to resolve those things and make sure to update everything as you go. Okay, the connection was successful in VS Code. Now all we need to do is connect this from the application itself. I mean, from the app module. So if you guys look around here, you have to import the Mongoose module and Mongoose root. Okay, so I will copy that. I'll put it in here, the Mongoose module, and I will get the import definition from here. I'll put it in here. And by the way, these configuration that I'm doing right now is like hard-coded ones, and these are like not environment specific. Means if you are developing this is only local, then it is fine. But if you are going with a production environment, these database URL, passwords, and everything will change. So in that case, make sure you use the Nest config service. That means using config service, you can dynamically load the configuration based on your environment. Okay, the Nest config service is where you can load these things dynamically. Right now, since the demonstration, I'm not going to go with the whole config service things, but it's right around the documentation. You can find that out. So we need the MongoDB connection URL. So here's a little trick that I do normally. I will right click and copy connection string right over here. So it's copy the connection string that I need to do. So I don't have to type it manually. You can see that it's like very long right now. I do not have a database set up right now, but I will say SENG for now. I will add the database right around here, and I need to create a database in here. The thing is about data. Thing about MongoDB, sometimes you do not have to do everything manually if the database is in creating. And since it is a NoSQL database, most of the time we have the flexibility of defining the things in our own way. So I save this application. Did I run it? No, I did not run it. So I will serve the application now. Let's serve the agro API. So if something goes wrong, if I can't connect to the database, it's normally going to show an error. But right now, I think I did not get any error. That means the connection was successful. And if you guys can see, I have put the database name right around the end of the port and the /, and that means the database is called SCNG. And if I go and refresh here, I think there should be a connection made and some data transfers to be made. It will create this. For now, let's keep moving. Okay, make sure this thing is working as expected, like what we have done. Okay, next thing that I would do is model our things. So we have like a small schema in here. We do not call tables in NoSQL. We call those things collections. So collection should be followed by a schema. So this is the schema that we're going to be using to store our data. So this is like the entity annotation. The schema annotation is something similar to entity annotation that we have in SQL databases. So I'm gonna create. I'm not going to create a cat one, but I have something similar. I think when I create the daily stock, they normally create something called entities. Okay, so I do not need this daily stock entity to be per se, but I'll rename it as schemas, since we are talking in MongoDB perspective. So I have created the schema, and this is gonna give me some errors. The name is changed, but rather than calling it entity, I would call it this one as schema as well. Okay, so right around that we see in here, we have a couple of things we need to work with. So we have to export the cat schema, cat document, and hydrated document and all those things. So we'll look into these things. So first of all, we need to export we need to make sure we have all the annotations in place. So I will annotate this with schema, which is coming from Mongoose. Okay. Schema. So this one should come from, if you guys can see it, it should come from Mongoose, not Mongoose itself, but from SJS Mongoose. And the properties, what we need to show, we will annotate with this prop. Okay, to make it more clean and precise, I would like to have it like this, but it's up to you how you manage your code. As you like, you can have these things. And the next thing is exporting the CAT document. So schema is like the blueprint of your things that you're going to store. A document is a record that you find in your database and your collection. So a hydrated document is a special document that is like with the ID and stuff. We call that as a hydrated document. And there are like certain things Mongoose like to inject into the document, so that we call this one as hydrated document. Okay, hydrated document is from Mongoose. And what is the schema that we're going to use? The daily stock. You can call it daily stock schema if you like, but that's not a necessity. The next thing is that you need to do is create the schema itself, which we can export to other guys. Okay, so I will create this daily stock schema. So this one is the one that we're going to be interacting with. We'll see in a bit, and we will create a schema for this class. Okay, so basically what you need to do is introduce these few exports and these few annotations after you install the dependencies. Okay, any questions up until this? Anything that I need to clarify? No? Okay. If you have anything, just raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay. So we have defined our schema. We took our entity and decorated with some decorators like schema, props, and all those things. So these are like schema indicate that this is going to be a schema. This class is going to be a schema. And prop is going to say, okay, this is a property that will be available on our database. Okay. If you have properties and not annotated with prop, it might not get in your database. It's going to be just a value that is there, but it's not going to get persisted in your collection or in your document. Okay. So I have my schema. Next thing is I need to do is I need access to this schema. I need to write data from this schema. All you have to do is there's a find all method. There's a create method. What we can do is we can create the schema, access this schema. So it's easy as well. You guys can get a better understanding of these props, but if they are required, how you're going to annotate those things, those kind of things. So I'm not gonna go one by one. Okay, have a look around it and take a read on it, so you guys can see how many things that we can do. Right now, it's going to be a basic plain old schema, and once you are registered that, you need to register that module with the schema that you have got. So I have to use the Mongoose module for feature. For root is that for root we have used to get the connection string and all those things. But since we can have multiple schemas, we need to register those schema within our features. So I'm going to use this import statement. And I'm going to use in the daily stock module. If you guys can remember, there is a daily stock module. So before I go in, just put it in here, and it will be from Nest.js Mongoose, and the name that's going to be there is going to be the daily stock. Daily stock name. So this is the class name that we're going to be using. This one. This is something coming from the constructor. Name is the name of the class itself. And the schema, it's going to be daily stock schema. The schema that we have created using this schema factory. Okay, so we have used this one. We have used this one, and we'll soon see how we can use the document as well. So we have defined the module. Before I move on, I will just do some house cleaning. Control S, and I would like my services to be more organized. So I move everything from here. My controllers to the controller section. So I get a few things in order. I have daily stock controller. Okay, spelling. Okay. So I know that controllers are going to be here, and other things are going to be somewhere else. Advancing imports. Okay, I think we are good. I moved two controllers and two services class in here, so it's easy to me to manage. It's completely optional, but you can do that. So I have defined the Mongoose module for feature. That means now this daily stock module knows about the schema. The schema registration is done. Now we need to do is using this schema to work with. I'm getting some errors, I think, because of the movements. If we run it again and see whether I have break some errors. No, all good. So we need to inject the model. Okay, we call this in entity or type ORM, we call these things repositories, but in Mongo's world, we call these things as models. So we have we need to inject a model. So we will use this constructor-based injection. So we are going to be injecting those things using our service, and within the service, we are having the constructor-based injections, and the daily stock is our class, and we need to use the model class which is coming from Mongoose. Okay, the model name I will just say daily stock model with a simple D. Okay, so now we have the daily stock model access. Now we can execute some commands and get the data. So it's going to be easy. Basically, if you look at it again, now you can see for creation, you can create these. For finding, you can find these things. So I'll use this cat find, or just say return this daily stock model find you, and you can fine tune, find all these like kind of the find all these like finding all the elements that are there without pagination, and I need to execute this command, and you guys will see that the return is not a daily stock, but it's gonna be should be awaited, right? Or it's gonna be a promise. The return type is different. Okay, so we have a promise, but we are sending a daily stock, a plain object. So I would have to wrap these things in promise. And since these are like hydrated documents, now when you are finding all those things, it's not going to be the basics ones. It's not going to be the basics one. It's going to be this document, which is hydrated. So if so it should be not cat document. It should be daily stock document. Okay. So when we getting back the details, we are not getting back the schema, but we are getting back the hydrated document. Okay, for hydrated document of daily stock, we have created a type which called daily stock document. So that is the expected return of our application, and it's going to be an array since we have more than one. Need to import it. That's it. So we get the daily stock things in this way. And if I save this, I think the app is still working. Did I turn on the NX the aggro? Okay, content is running 4200. Let me go 4200. Okay, I have the login part working on. Think daily stock. Let me inspect this section. I'll have it in here. If I go to network section, if I refresh this again, now I get a daily stock, but you guys can see that it is empty. That's because we do not have any data in our database. We can go in here in the MongoDB, and let me check whether the connection. Yeah, there you go. So since you are accessing the document, MongoDB is wise enough to create the database if not existing, and they have created the what do you call the collection as well. It's going to be the same name as the class itself. So if you guys can see that we do not have any documents, that's why it is showing empty. and we can view documents in here, but I would like to demonstrate by inserting a document in here. Use SNG and get collection, insert one, and we have two fields, date, and it's going to be a new date, and we have amount, and say like 10. Okay, so I can hit this play button over here. If all things goes wrong, where I think inserted ID was there, like since these things need an ID, automatically generated UUID is there for us. Now, if I refresh this in here, now I can see that I will not save this. I can see a document right around here. This is the ID was given, and there is the date, the current timestamp, and the amount is 10. So this data is now in the database. Now, if I go to the front-end application, and if I refresh, now you guys can see the date is coming. That means the daily stock and the amount, date, and ID, all those values are coming. But I inserted these values using the built-in command to demonstrate, but most of the time there will be input form. Okay, you guys can create a form, something like in the GRN section, dates and everything. You just send to the server, and the server will respond back with the data like we did in the daily stock section. Okay, this is the generated ID. So most of the time, underscore ID is the default ID mechanism for Mongo. So expect it's easy to find. Most of the time, we consider like if it is underscore ID, okay, the database must be Mongo. Okay, that's like assumption that we take, but it's not always the case. You can change it even, but you guys get the idea. And so daily stock, what we have done is we have inserted one record, and it is getting populated. Yeah. So any questions how we work with the database and database integration? Okay. I think everybody's having a good memory and they can understand. Everybody got the idea? Raise your hand. Who got the idea? Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. So as I mentioned earlier, I would push this code and you guys can check that out. Make sure to install the this kind of tool so it's making life easy, or you can use the some other tools like Mongo Connect or anything like that, and that's going to be really easy as well. Okay. Right, to cover this. So other endpoints, you guys have to figure those things out. Okay. So like I have only find all method execution, that is, but there are certainly way more than this. There are DTOs, validations going on. You can do validations. So those kind of things. Please refer the documentation. As you can see, it's dead simple. You don't need to have a PhD degree on that. Just read it, copy paste it. Okay, so it's gonna be like really easy and really fun, and you guys can work around it. I'm not saying that it's hard, but if you know the concepts, it's really easy to understand and really easy to teach you guys. So the best way you can learn the concept is trying out. Try out every time that you want to build something, then you get the idea. So practice on validations. So those things are like way more important. I'm not sure whether we have documentation on. logging, queue, task scheduling, now serialization and deserialization, validation database. So at least have a good these techniques. Okay, you don't have to use those things. Okay, not a single application will be using this everything, but knowing these things are there, that will give you the confidence. Okay, I can use caching for this. I can use logging for this. I can use cookies for this. I can use event for this. So that's kind of knowledge. Only you can get this. Just reading these things would make things easy. Okay, if you want to add compression, how you gonna do that, and all those things are there. Like literally with the one scroll, you can read it out and get it done. So MongoDB related stuff, I think the connection is there, model is there, validations if you have those things. You can use that, and there are things like hooks in Mongoose. Like you can have a cat schema and schema pre section. That means before you save, what should happen, you can change the schema and all those things. Sometimes you need to do validation. Sometimes you need to send do some corrections in the model. This kind of things you can get that and save around it. So there are like a lot of things that you can do. You can see this config service is also used in here to do some modification to the schema, the content. And there are plugins, as you can see. You can apply those things as well. Some advanced stuff are gonna be here. The thing is, I can't like give you the exact. Okay, this is gonna be something that you need to do or something like that. It's always gonna be that you guys that need to work on these things and get it up and running. Okay. All right. So there it is, like the simplest form of connecting a database and getting it done. This is like not the full version of the things. You should also consider validations before you save. Okay, and you guys can see that this schema is pretty much simple. Okay, no required fields, no something like that. So you can do that kind of validations in here, or you can do validations on the controller level with the DTOs. Okay, sorry. So those kind of things you guys need to watch yourself. Data validity, MongoDB can't help with that. Okay, if the amount is something needed, if it is required, MongoDB does not know that. Mongoose does not know that. Only the requirement is there. So you guys have to be very careful what is required, what is not, and annotate those things. Test it thoroughly. Okay. Okay. Anything that I need to like, if you guys have any questions, I mean, not from the part that I taught you right now, but it would be great if you can teach this technique or something like that. I can give it a try. Do you have any request, something like that? Do you guys have any request on, okay, how do we do this? How do we do that kind of things? Dockerizing the backend. Yeah, sure. I can show you that with the DB connection and all. Okay, that's doable. Any other queries? So Sun is asking how we can Dockerize the backend. That is easy. Any other questions before I take this one? Okay, I hope authentication for backend API like JWT. Okay, yeah, that can be done. So JW token and JW token and the dollarization. Okay. Any other queries? So we have the implementation of like what we call the JW authentication in our application using Firebase. So there is something you can see when you are logging in, if I'm not mistaken. Where was our application? I need to find a logout button. So if I log in here, so login, sign in, count, you get actually a ID token and a refresh token. So these kind of things are like generated from the Firebase itself. So these are like generated not from our side, but the Google side. So there is ID token and everything, but we can remove that and use our own authentication mechanism. That is okay. Yeah. Any other request? Okay. So let me go with the request order. So Dockerizing this section first. So Dockerization is like not that hard. All you need to do is find the correct Docker image and put this code in. That's it. And we can use script to do those things. Mostly I do scripting, and the scripting is pretty much easy to do the Dockerization in local machines. But there are some tools. I'm not sure whether those are available in Node.js, but I have seen when I was while I was working on a Java project, there were Dockerization things. Dockerization is like the built into the frameworks like Spring Boot. Okay, Spring Boot have like the best library ecosystems out there. So if you want to Dockerize the whole thing with my own project, we just have a dependency and the Dockerization happens. But I would not go there. I will just say, okay, Dockerization should be happen. Dockerization can be achieved manually. We can do it manually. The reason that I'm preferring that is you can have a little bit of scripting in there, and the scripting will actually make the scripting that we can write will make things a little bit easier for us. So I would probably go with Dockerizing with this custom script. Okay, or you can use okay. Oh yeah, you can use like any tools out there which you can automate these things. Okay. Okay, there's another question from security perspective. People say Java backend is the best over JS backend. Is that true? Well, we can't say security of Java backend is better than a JavaScript backend. I mean, it depends on how you put your security in. Even though it is a Java or even it is like a JS, anything. If you are following the best practices and the security protocols and security functionalities that you guys are doing, and that's gonna make your application secure. It does not depend on the application or the framework or whatever you are running. I mean, for example, let me give an example. There was huge vulnerability in Java for Log4j. Okay, so you can't say it is well secured or something like that. But even though you are even though you are affected by the Log4j vulnerability, but if you have put these things under a Docker image and you have secured these things and put the firewalls in place and you have the SSL certificates and all, a hacker or someone does not have access to the shell, then you can secure your application. So it depends on how you implement the security. Okay, so for example, we have a mechanism for generating SHA. So if you use SHA-128 or something like that, that is considered not a good security practice. Those are easily breakable. So it might have like opinionated things, but from my perspective, since I have been working on both Java and JavaScript, basically every framework, everything that you write, everything that you see is not secure. Okay, you can't have like full secured system. All you can do is mitigate the things. Security breaches are inevitable. Like you can't stop those things happening, but you can monitor and you can recover. That is the only option that you have. Okay, so backing up, taking things into your hand, that's kind of things that will work for you. And I'm not sure like on what basis we can say like Java is better, JavaScript is better, Python is better. That's not something that I can compare. It depends on the Java backend that you might use. If you are using something more popular like Spring Boot, you would find that actually Spring Boot is like a really good ecosystem, and they provide plenty of updates. As soon as they find something, the update is there. Okay, so we can get the usage of that. But for JavaScript backend, sometimes some vulnerabilities take time to heal. It takes some time to get the fix in place. So those things you can consider, yes. But I can't say okay, Java is better, JavaScript is better. It's up to you to decide and do your own research and check which platform, which framework has less bugs, and which frameworks have fixed those bugs in a decent amount of time. Okay, so any framework, if you take, you have errors. I think we have called CSV vulnerabilities, if I'm not CVS. So CVS security vulnerabilities. So this is kind of a place where you can find the vulnerabilities on given platforms. So if you find if you can find these things, like what are the vulnerabilities that you are having, it can be mixed and both. Okay, I can't guarantee and say okay, this is only Node.js. I mean, you guys can see that this is a huge list, and so there is a score of 10 exploit in here, and the so this is like a OS level vulnerability thing, if I'm not mistaken. Heap-based buffer on protocol connection is and denies a crash possibility. Yeah. Red Hat. So I think this is something related to the operating systems. Okay, but even for frameworks, you can get the vulnerabilities. What are the vulnerabilities out there? Basically, nothing is secure. It's up to you to make it secure as much as possible. I hope that's a vague answer. I can't be biased on that. That's why I have to give like the real truth about it. That I hope that's give you insight on that. But if you do not agree with me, if you can say, okay, no, we have found this evidence, just let's go through with that. I mean, I'm always open to hear those things from you guys as well. That is the expectation from my side, so I can learn something. Okay, so for the next customer, or if I find someone else, I can pitch the idea. Okay, we can do this in Java, or we can do this in JavaScript. So yeah, that's good. Yeah. So what I'll do is we will Dockerize this. It's quite the simple approach that I would find. So the first thing is that you need to do to Dockerize these kind of applications. The problem arise how much you are gonna be willing to expose this. Okay, so there are a couple of things that you might consider. Are you going to expose the API to the outside world? Okay, are you going to expose it directly to the outside world? Are you going to expose your database for the outside world directly? Are you going to expose the front end only to your users? So that's kind of this kind of things you guys need to answer in order to get the full Dockerization process. Okay, so right now what we can do is we have the front end. We have this front end, and we have this back end. Right now, our application is running on only one environment. Okay, now we have to do, as I mentioned earlier, we need to change things according to the environment that we are running on. For example, this one, the database connection that we are using, the username and password, that can be same. That is something I would not recommend, but that's something you can do. But the host, the port and all those things can be changed, can be different. They are not the same that what we are running in the application. So based on the environment, we might need to change these values. Okay, so I can always change when I'm about to do a production build. I can change the host name and I can do a production build, but it is not a good approach. So I will just simply convert this into environment variable, so you guys can leverage and use that as well. First of all, that is needed because we are changing the environment from development environment to production. So when we are Dockerizing, the values will change. The database location especially is going to change. So we have to make sure the configuration change on our build. So in order to do that, I think configuration, yes, we need to have a configuration dependency. Let me add that. Tab configuration, I will just pause it. So one of the things with the security, if you guys can see, I have 10 vulnerabilities. Okay, so if I ignore that, it doesn't matter what platforms that I am in, I'm gonna get affected by these vulnerabilities. Okay, so security, as I mentioned earlier, it is practice. It is something that is inevitable, but it is not something that you can, you know, have like that is not something that you can avoid at some point. Yeah. So yeah, sure. There are tools that we scans for vulnerabilities like Sync and Sync I am familiar with. 3V I am not that much familiar with the tool itself. So even in Docker, you have the Sync integration. Once you create your Docker image, you can run a Sync scan that will tell you, okay, the production build that you have in place have some vulnerabilities or not. So yeah, we will use the configurations based on the default values that we are getting. So this configuration is little bit big. I think we do not need to go that deep. But if you need more more control over your things, yes, you can use. But for us, I think a simple env would do. Okay. The above will load an EAP file from the default location, the project root directory from the env without a variable assigned to process.env. Store results can be configuration service for root. Initialize can be write on .env. Variable name is runtime. Variable OS shells at runtime text proceeding. Custom env file path by default, the package look for env. Root, you can simply have multiple path. Disable variable loading. What I'll do is I will create a custom configuration. It's easy. So I have the configuration module in here. So I need to import in the app module section. So what I'll do is I will go to the configuration. If we have already configure module. Give me a second. I will copy some codes. App module. Do not need that. From there. So what we need to do is we need to have the environment path. So I will create a directory called environments in here, so that each and every environment is different. So if you're running on a test environment, or you are running unit test, the environment will be test.env. I mean, the process will be renamed as environment test. If you are running the production one, it will be production, and if you are running on a local machine, it will be development. So what I'll do is I will create. I will delete this assist. I don't need this actually. So I have the application. I'll create a environment. Hope I spelled correctly. Okay. So environments. So as I mentioned earlier, two different environments that I'm going to use. One is production.env. The other one is development.env. Okay. So right now, when we are starting locally, we will be using the development env. So I'm going to say mongo underscore URL. It is and we do not put spaces in env files. So we have the app module. and this is going to be our Mongo URL. Okay. This should be loaded from the configuration file, the environment file that we have created right now. So I'm gonna just have it in here. And first of all, we check whether the environment configuration is working. Then we will create the production one as well. So configure module, we need to import that. Module. So it is coming from here. Okay. So the next thing that you need to do is we need to get the environment file path. So we have this nice helper function. Okay, do not put these things in the app module. I'll just create a helper class, otherwise. App.helper.ts. So our codes is like a little bit clean, otherwise not gonna be good. Reading is also not perfect. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna check the destination first. So process.env return the environment that we are currently in. So if you are in if you haven't specified anything, it will be by default there. But if you are running a test, it will be the environment will be test. If you are in production, the environment will be set as production. So those things are handled by NX, and while they are building the application, those things will be automatically set. So if nothing found, it will look for .env file in the destination. That means the destination I'm talking about is in this environment directory. And these things are like okay, if the file name is sorry, if the environment is there, then use that environment file. If not, use the default one. So that's basically thing that we're gonna do. So next thing that we will be following is get the environment path. Okay, something like this. Get the environment path is from the helper itself, and for the configuration manager for root, I have to provide this. Okay, so we are just simply saying when you're searching for configuration, check out this directory. That means the directory name, that is the current directory that we are in, and search for the environments file. So right now I'm gonna remove this, and I will say this environment path is getting the file that that we need. So I can just say console log and env file. And if I go into my Node.js application, let me no such a files. Okay, sorry, I think the asset folder is needed. Can say project. I don't need this one right now. I deleted that. So I need to make sure it is not needed. Okay, let me run it again. So the module database connection I have not set up right now, but I think you can see the environment path that we are looking for. It's going to be like the environment.env. That is like the environment path that they are looking for. Let me go back for the app helper. So the destination seems to be wrong. That's why it is falling back to the .env files. Did go API? Okay, I think I have to put it in API environments, and not on the SRC, but in here. Hope whether we get the development one, this side. Still, okay, sorry. The reason is that when we are running this code, you can see that it is running out of dist directory. That means we are running in the distributed, the compiled version of this. So if you look at the compiled version right now, we need to show all the files. Where is that? So if you look at the dist directory API, you can see only main and main.js. So this is the file that we are running as of now. But in here, you can't find environment files. So the reason behind that, we need to manually copy this file, manually copy the environment configuration for this endpoint location. So we don't need to do that manually. What we can do is we can have this Dilagro project JSON file. If you guys can remember, I removed the SRC assets. The asset directory is no longer there. I will remove back into SRC, the environment files. But I can say, okay, when you are building the application, copy these assets. That means the environment assets. Copy these assets, environment asset directory to your final build. Okay. So now if I run it once again, you can see that it is taking out the environment.development env. That means the file is copied and file is existing. You can check that out if you go to dist, and you can see the environment directory is already copied. So in order to make sure you are copying that, make sure to add the that directory, environments directory, in your assets definitions. Otherwise, it won't get copied back. Okay. Now we need to do is we have the development setup in here. That is fine. And the project JSON is no longer needed. So we need to make sure that, okay, now Mongoose need to get the values. Mongoose need to get the values from the configuration, the configuration module. So let's see how we can do that. I'm not sure whether it is there. Mongoose module nest from config service. Probably there is a for config, not server, service. Unable to configure. Mongoose. Synchronous. I think this one is for root asynchronous. Like this, we have to work, if I'm not mistaken. Or you can use a MongoDB configuration service, a third-party service, and Mongoose option connection factory. I think I would go with this and have this implemented. That would make things a little bit easier. Right. So we have to use a different approach rather than using for root async. That means we are gonna we need to read the configuration from the config files, then load the database. So we have to do something like this. We will use so we are depending on the config service, and we don't need this in here. Config Mongoose module options, configuration service, and Mongoose module option, you need to have the URI in place. When you are reading Mongo, configure namespace. Something like this. Okay, configuration service. I need to create an object. You can see that use factory configuration service, and I will return. Yeah, I need to change this a little bit. So the return file that is expected is somewhat called the returning type is something called Mongoose module options. So we can define that. So we are not giving the wrong type. Yeah. Return type is can't remember. So for now, just say we Mongoose. Sorry, it knows what's needed. It needs the URI, right? So URI, how we can get? There is the configuration service. Then from configuration service, we have a method called get. What is the key that we want to get? If you go to the development environment, we have a variable called Mongo URL. So that is the one we are interested in, Mongo URL. Okay. So you can create interface for this, and that interface will also work fine to keep the type safety. Like this is a hardcode string, and we do not have a mapping for this. But right now, what we need is we just go with the hard-coded values, which is the same key. The key should not be different. So now what we're gonna do is we will connect the Mongo's database based on the configuration service values. Okay, configuration service will get this and will work. So we can see whether it is working or not. Let's go in here, try refresh. I think the API is down. Let me restart the API and see whether it is working. Still not. Let's see what's next. Can't resolve the Mongoose options. Please make sure that argument configuration is available at Mongoose context. Mongoose core module current. Mistakes can't resolve dependencies option, argument configuration size. Did we add the dependency injection? Yes. Right? Did we miss something? And fix this, I think we have find that, right? Import config module. Okay, within sure. Okay, so within the Mongoose module, we need to import the config module as well. Then we can use the configuration service, and the configuration service use this use factory method to create the MongoDB connection URL. So it's like this that you need to do, and now it's supposed to work. Also, yeah. So you can see that our development environment variable is taken from the configuration service. So this is something that we had to do since we are dockerizing these things. Any questions, guys, with the configuration? Now we are not getting configuration hard coded, but we are getting it from a separate value. The reason behind that is when we are going to production, we can't have the same uh, production database URLs, and the configuration might change. So we are using a separate configuration for each of the environments that we're going to be producing. Okay. So the next thing that I am going to do is so one question: do you need the full tour on Dockerizing the API as well as the front end, or only the API is enough for now? Which one you guys prefer? Dockerization for whole application, or I can just Dockerize. Okay, which one you guys need? All the Dockerization or API Dockerization? Because please raise your hand. I need to have a vote around that. I would like to Dockerize all. Others? I would like to Dockerize the API only. So it's a tie, guys. I can't decide what you want to do. For now, I will just go ahead with the API since the Dockerization for all will take a little bit of time, and it's something we can do afterwards. Since you guys will Dockerizing one thing, and you will get the other thing pretty much easily. So let's Dockerize only one thing for now. Okay. The first of all, what we need to do is so when we are Dockerizing images, we normally can do in different ways, as I mentioned. We can use any existing library, or we can use our own scripts. Okay, so my personal preference would be doing script. That's because we have a lot of control over it. Okay, the control that we are having over Dockerization build is much easier rather than having it a third-party library will do. And at the end of the day, sometimes these libraries do not match our expectations. Sometimes what we are doing is eventually end up doing the same thing over and again. Okay, so what I will do is I will since I have a deployment plan in here, I will create let me double check on the do I have a script rather than putting everything on? You can actually test that thing. So the first thing that I would do is like copy the necessary files to the Docker image. Okay, so in order to do that, what we have to do is we need to find a Docker file. So I will keep my Docker related things in a folder called Docker. Okay, so I know Dockerization things happen in here. In here, I can create a new folder to represent each and every one. So we'll add grow /API. So this is gonna have the Docker files related to the Allegro API. So what I will do is I will need a Docker file in here. So basically a Docker file in this scenario is something that what we need in order to create an image. Okay, so image creation is one of the main important things that we need to do. So I'm not going to go through the Docker things at this moment. So it's going to be like teaching you guys Docker. So basically, it's taking an image, changing the working directory. It will copy the package JSON, but right now you guys can see the package JSON is not here. And once it is done, I will run the npm and omit devs. And what I'll do is there is something called this build.tar.js. Let me show you that. And I will run the main application once I'm done with the build and everything. I will copy it back. So this is like a basic Docker image that we can create. Right now, what I need to do is I need to create a script. Okay, so I'll be creating a script to Dockerize this. Even full-fledged deployment can be done, but right now I will just create a simple Dockerized image. So I will create a new file in here. I will say Docker Docker deploy sh for shell scripting. Okay, I'm going to create the shell script since we are in Linux and everything. If you are in Windows, probably you have to create command line, but I would definitely use a terminal, Windows terminal even, or a Git terminal or PuTTY client or something like that in order to work with that. The next thing that we need to do is we need to what we do if we want to create a Docker image manually. First thing that we need to do is to build the image, right? Build the image that we are going to be working with. So I'm going to use some build, some build API. So I'm going to use a command to build the application. So if I say nx build, it won't work. So let me come here and say, no, it's not working. I have to give a project. Dil agro. What should I say here? So by executing this command, you can see the production build got created, right? So that is the command that I am interested in first. First, I need to build the command, build the actual thing. Okay. Then what I have to do is, if I go to the build one, if you go to apps, you can see all these files are there. Okay, all these files are there, and what I need to do is I need to get all of these files, the environment, main and main map.js, those kind of things inside my Docker image. I need to have this Dilagro API within the Docker image that I'm about to build. So in order to do that, I need to copy these things into here. But one thing that I have found really easy to that is if we compress everything first and copy it to the Docker image, that would make the build process very fast. Okay, so we can do is what we can do is we can copy the file and we can put it in the build directory. So I will execute that. First of all, okay, one other thing in this Docker file, we need the package JSON to be here. So I will copy this package JSON into here. Then we will take the next step. So basically, I have like a cheat sheet in here. So I will say, I will copy the package JSON to Docker in here, Docker Dilagro API. Okay, so I will copy the existing file from here to Docker deploy sh. This file I will copy into here. Now if I can run this sh deploy Docker deploy, Okay, now you guys can see it is executing this, and it is executing the package.json copy. Now you can see the package.json is got copied to our destination. Now what we have to do is we need to compress everything which is in the distribution directory. So I will say copy everything, Docker API. So in dist apps, you will find Dilagro APIs. Okay, everything that in here, compress and copy that into Docker Dilagro API and have it named as build.tar.gz. Okay, that's the basic command that we're gonna do. So it's really simple. We're gonna compress the files which is in the Dilagro API directory, all these things. We will copy these things, we'll compress these things, okay, this whole folder, and we will copy it back to this Dilagro API section. So if I execute the command again, now you can see building that it's completed and successful. Now if you guys go to the docker.dilagro API section, in here you will find this build.tar file. You can like reveal in Finder, or you can just extract and see. It is gonna have the same exact content of the content that was in the dist directory. Okay, the same thing in the dist directory. So that is one part done. So we have the star file. Now, if you take a closer look around here, closer look around the Docker image. So we have changed in the working directory. We copy the package.json. Of course, package.json is here, and we will install the all the related backend dependencies because that is needed, and we will add this API sections. That means the build.tar.gz, which we have already compiled, and the build version is going to be here, and it's gonna run it. Okay, so Docker deploy sh. We'll do these things one by one. Okay, first build it, copy it, and copy the tar. Then finally, we have to build the Docker image. So Docker image building is really simple if you guys know Docker commands. I will have a Docker build command and Docker file. What is the Docker file that I am interested in? So currently, currently I am pointing a Docker file which is not in here. So I might need to add the relative path in here. So I have to say Docker file Dilagro API, and there we'll find the Docker file. And what is the tag version that we're going to be using? You can tag these things for easiness. I would copy these values as well. Like these are variables. So we have the app version. So we have SENG. So this is going to be whatever the name that you are supposed to give. SENG, let's say a nest API. You can call whatever you like. And I would just simply rename to make it more sense, like Docker API. There you go. So what we initially doing in here, we are building a Docker building out of this Docker file, which is this one. Since I am executing from the root, I need to point out the exact place where I did. And I have to get the Docker file and execute the Docker tag command, and it should build a Docker image. Let me see whether it is working. Yeah, there you go. So it starts to build the Docker image and everything it has. So right now, it might take a little bit of time. The reason behind that is it is executing one by one the files. That means the steps that we are working with. For some reason, I think I don't have a good internet connection. This is normally get when I do not have access to that, or the internet is so busy. Let me check whether I have a local image. Docker images. You have not one. Come on. Should be there. Oh, it's frustrating. Going to Mongo one, we have PG and Postgres. Yeah, I don't have a Mongo. Sorry, Node.js one. We check. We changed the version that I know of. It was, what was it again? Let me check. I need to have a working Docker image. 19.0 master slave. Okay, I think the image is there. I am getting an error. A working directory copy. Then I have a cache on that for some reason, and I have this add.build.tar.xy. I do not have build.tar.xy, right? It's fine. Oh, I know the reason. The reason is behind that. When you're executing in the order, the sh file from the outer root of the directory, this is not the correct path. So what normally what I do is doing a hack. I would just cd in here. Okay, I'll just change directory. And once I'm changed, I'm gonna execute the Docker images command. So I don't need to execute it from the outside. Now you guys can see that it is running, and it is gonna take a little bit of time since npm is gonna download everything that needed for the running the backend. So the thing that you guys need to remember is that when you are when you are building the front end, and once the front end is completely compiled, you don't need any node modules to run it. But when you build a backend, that is not the case. According to while we are working all these things into work, the node modules which we need to run the backend is there should be these things aligned within the use. Otherwise, it won't work. So make sure when you are developing the backend, the package JSON is there, and npm install is also executed. So unless you change package JSON frequently, this set step will be cached. So it will be really really speed up the things. So you don't have to worry about like running this again and again. Right now, it will take time, but eventually it will build. Okay, let's see. I'll put it in the background, so it will be built. So after all, if you are success, you will have something like this tag version and everything. So the Docker image is built on. Okay. So basically, my approach is like to use a simple scripting like this in order to do the building and all the stuff. Okay. So I hope that answers the Dockerization for this part. I know it's like a little bit big, but something that you guys have to deal with. Any questions on this? Any suggestions you guys have found? Anything that you need to add? Let's discuss. Even this script can be modified for a CI/CD pipeline from your local machine. But if you are using if you are using what do you call pipelines or Bamboo pipelines or GitHub Actions, you will find the similar steps that we are doing right now. So in steps or Bamboo pipelines, you will do with their own mechanisms. In here, what we have done is we have write our own script, so it's easy. You don't need this what do you call these like calling stuff and everything. I just made it so fancy so you guys can see it. Okay. Any questions? Any suggestions on this approach? Okay. So now, so you can follow the same step for building the front end. Front end, of course, you can't serve this directly. You need to have Nginx to do that. So probably you will find a Nginx configuration right around here, and you should work with that. Right now, I'm not going to go through all the steps. It's just add few lines of code in here, and your API can be all the things can be run as well. So one other thing that I need to do is multi-stage build. Yes, so we can have multiple stage of building in a machine. Yes, we can do all these Docker build images kind of things in Docker file as well. So there will be two stages. One is the build stage, one is the execution stage. So the build stage one is what we'll do is what we are doing right now. We can do it in the build stage and have it run in the distribution stage. That is true. But in terms of local deployments, or if you are doing something like that, it would make more speed. Like, for example, I follow a pattern. I build most of the code in locally, and I deploy it directly on the servers. So building should happen in here. Otherwise, if I build the whole image and try to push it there, it will be like around 100 megabytes or say 600 megabytes. Right now, if I follow this pattern, local build and local deployment, it will only need to execute this file. It's going to be in kilobytes most of the time. So we don't rely on CI/CD pipeline or something like that. We can directly deploy these things if you have low resources or you have very quick integration that's going on. By the way, when you are using NX, the request gets cached, the builds get cached. So rather than going a CI/CD pipeline, since it is local, the speed is way too high. But there are things like from NX which called NX Cloud, which does the same thing. You cache these things in the cloud and they work as well. So this is one approach. I know Yes, you are correct, Krishan. You can use multi-stage build if you're in a CI/CD pipeline. That is another way where you can all uh, get these things and put in a separate Docker stage. Yeah, that is true. Good point. Any other things? Yeah. So most of the time when you are like doing a CI/CD pipeline, these things you can actually execute in the pipeline itself. So you don't have to like worry about these things in a rush. Okay. All right. Uh, any other things that I need to clarify on this? We need to add this to copy. Copy relative path. I have it. Not in here, I think. Copy relative path. And I need to add it to git ignore, otherwise the build is getting on my. Yeah, otherwise this build file will get in the repository as well. I don't need that. Anything from the package, and also this package isn't that. I don't need that one to be. It's like a generated one-time thing. You don't need these things laying around your um, repository. So, yeah. Like the dist, we don't push the dist, so we don't need to do that. Okay. So all good with the solutions? We can move on to the second request, authentication mechanisms. What's the time it is? It is 19. 19 means can't read the time. 5 to 8. No, we start at 6, so we have an hour. Okay. Let me push this code section so you guys can have a snapshot. Docker implementation added. Okay, and we'll push. All right, so still that goes on. I think I have a few other things. Yeah, all right. Do not need this, do not need this. So we'll start with the authentication section. That means how we're gonna do authentication over um, uh, something that we can use. So the basics of authentication, I'm not gonna talk to you guys in like what is authentication, what is authorization, and all those things. So basically, authentication stand for are you allowed to use it? Okay. Authorization is uh, authentication is are you just don't get this confused. Authentication is are you allowed or not. Authorization is are you allowed to perform a certain action or not. Okay, so any authenticated user might not have authorization to do that. For example, say for example, a system of school, and let's take it physically, not something like a system. So authenticated mean sense. Sorry, authorization. Sorry, authentication in the sense like, am I allowed to go inside the school? If you are a student, yes. If you are a teacher, yes. If you are someone who's working at the school, yes. If you are principal, yes. So authorization is another thing. If you are you allowed to go to teacher's room while there is no one is there? That is authorization for a student. Okay, a student tries to go to a teacher's break room while there are no one else there, or even without a permission. You can't just barge into people's places. So within the system, you whether you have the right to go or perform some action, that is called authorization. Authentication in the sense, yes, you have access to the system, or you don't have. That means you can enter the school. That is authentication. Authorization is whether you are allowed to perform a certain action or not. Okay, so we will see authentication and authorization. So there are few. There is like most popular one for authentication right now is using something like bearer token. Since we are developing an API, this API is going to contain what we call this API is protected by not having any sessions. Okay, session authorization is something different. What we are talking here is session list. Okay, so we do not have any authorization or authentication mechanism in session level. We are doing in token layer. So the most common authorization mechanism right now, authorization, it's not authorization or authentication, but we have something called Auth2. Okay, Auth2 is built on top of a few of the technologies that we are having, the JWT token, bearer token, how we can use those things. But right now we are not going to go with any auth flows. We're just going to take a simple use case scenario. We will take the username and the password, and what we'll do is we will by prompting user the username and password, they will give the username and password. In exchange, if the username and password match, in exchange they will get a token. Token is like like key. Okay, for a limited time. Now you have this token. That means you have this. You have the authentication. You can access any service using this token. Okay, but authorization comes in different level. Even though you have the authentication, are you allowed to perform a certain action is decided by authorization. Okay, so we will create the dummy services in here. Okay, you can see that we are using a dummy service because now you guys have the knowledge on accessing the things from database like we did early on. So we will have a dummy service, but if you like, you can put these things in a database and do everything in a good way. Okay, right now I'm gonna just create a dummy user service where the user ID is there, username is there, and the password is like this. Okay, so this is not the way that you're gonna do, but we will start from here, and you guys can continue having these things in database and doing database operation to check whether the user is in there and so on and so forth. So you have to create a user module. So I will use the commands in hand. I go to apps, Gilagro API, SRC apps. So I have a user module to create. I'll use nnext generate. This again. In app, I will use generate, and one is called resources, Nest.js resource. Okay, so I'll create this one as user. I think they are getting the wrong path for some reason. I'll copy the relative path. SRC apps, relative apps user. Yeah, that should work. Hope so. Did I create somewhere else? For sure, yeah. Don't think I need the SRC part. SRC. It is always putting SRC in here. So let me just delete it and generate, and I will just copy paste it. I will take the user, object, and API SRC app, and put it in here. Do not need this extra one. Okay, so I have the user. We have created that entity and everything using the built-in things. So I will use the same user service and find one method within the service. So I will be just replacing this. And as you progress, take these values from the database. Okay, right now I'm going to use this one right out of the example. So I have the user. Okay, I will import that one. Okay. The next thing is user module. I think we already created that. And we need authentication service, which is going to handle the username and password signing process. Okay, this is like the most basic thing that you can do, but we will create that authentication service right now, and we will progress through this thing in a little bit. So we have auth service. We can have these services under user, or we can have auth module separately. That's up to you. I will create, since this is like a different section of our application, I would definitely go with auth in a different module. I'm not going to create the whole things up. I will just create the service directory, because auth. Let me check whether I have. Okay, I need to have the auth controllers and everything. Yeah. So I will create auth module as well. Otherwise, it will not make sense. FE resource. I'll call this auth. Generate. Seems to be the wrong place. I will replace it in here. Delete this one again. And what you can do is we have the auth service, and it is not going to be something like all the controllers that we are having. We do not have get post and everything. We just have one single method, which is called the sign in or login, whatever you like to call. So I will have something like this. It's a pretty simple method. So I need to inject auth service. Okay, if I go to auth service, you will find the auth service have the user service injection in place. I will copy and paste these things. So auth service, user service should be injected, and I will add the old missing import. So user service, I think. Yeah. So password does not exist in the user. So I think I need to create it in the user object right now. Find one sync, find one user. So user does not have something called password. So I will have a password in here. Password. So make sure if you are using something like a document database or Mongo, something like that, make sure these things are in place. Otherwise, it won't work. So really simple, and I do not think we will be exposing the user service that much. All right. User controller, what's the okay. Find one. I think I had to delete this one because it's changed right now. Okay. So we have authentication service. So right now we are just doing some basic stuff. We just check the password. If the password is not the password they are providing, we say unauthorized. Okay, and we send back the result in here. That means we are extracting the things other than the password and send it back. Okay, so this is what results is about. So for example, this user object have something called user ID and username. So by the end of it, and password will be not sent, but user ID and username will be sent back. Okay, so this is not generating any authentication code or something like that. We are just laying the foundation how we're gonna do this. Okay, so in the entity you will find user ID field. It's gonna be a number, username something like a string. All right. So next thing that we need to do is we need to call this method. But remember, authentication service. If you look at the authentication service, it's depending on user service. Okay. So user service is the user service does not belong. User service is not something belongs to authentication. So we need to import it. Import the relevant module for accessing those things. Otherwise, it will not work. Right now, we have the auth module. Make sure the auth module is registered in app module. Otherwise, app module does not know anything about the auth. Do we have any errors right now? Yes. Auth module is not a valid user service is a provider, a part of the current auth module. User service is exported. Okay. So the thing is, if you look at the user module provide this user service, but it is not exposed to the outside world. So user service is there within the user module. Anyone within the user module can use that, but it is not accessible from the it's not something you can access from other modules. So we have to make sure we are giving permission for the other modules to use the user service. So how do we do that? We use the exports keyword and we provide the user service. And in this scenario, what will happen is the user module will allow to use the user service in other modules. In this case, the user service is needed in the auth service. You can see in here. So the auth service now can rely on that. So I think we should get we should not have any errors. So we have the working authentication right around here. So so we have the API user endpoints mapped around it, and we have the authentication login post only is there. So we can call it from our front end. So luckily we have front end in here. So we need to call it from the login module in here, but you guys can see that right now we are using the username and password login stuff from Firebase. I'll just remove that for now. Okay, I'll say on login. what should happen right now. And the thing is, we need to send the username and password. In this scenario, we consider as the email, sorry, email and the password to the server, and to get value it is okay or not. Right now, we do not have a service that we can talk with the backend. We are now in front end. So make sure we have authentication endpoint. We do not have something like that. So we will create a service around here. In next service, and it is gonna be a Angular semantic service, and I will call it as auth apps in agro API. I need to have a little more depth on this. After the path, I will have auth as here. Apps still agro src app. src app service, right? Services. App services auth service. I hope it is the correct path. Yeah. So we have the auth service right around here, and the auth service is where we can talk with the backend. So in order to talk, we have to have the HTTP client. And while using HTTP client, I can use the sign in method, so which will give you an email of type string and password of type string. Okay, simple. And I will have to return this .http client. It's going to be a post, and we have to look into the backend how it is requesting data. So if I go to authentication, and in the controller, it's a body and it is signed in DTO and record. I would not use that. I would look undefined. So any, just keep any for now. So we should have within this DTO something called username and another thing called password. Okay. So the body should contain a username and a password. So we have to do the same thing. We will say username in here and the password. So the body will be username. Actually, any simple. That is something first of all, I need the URL. So it's going to be auth. If you guys go, if you go to the controller, it is auth. Since we have done the what do you call the base interceptor and everything, you don't need the port and everything. We just need to have this URL. So auth is the URL, and the body of the content is going to be username and password. It should be simple. Okay. So I am giving username and password from front end. Within the login component, I need the constructor injector for this. That means I need to inject the authentication service, private auth service, and it's going to be auth service, this one. And I will call this authentication service, auth service, sign in. I need to have the username and password. If you guys can see that in here, it is called email and the password. So I can have the form group either rename this to username. Okay, username, and this one is called password. So I can extract those values directly. So I need the this dot user login form group username, and we have the password. Oh, sorry, from value. Let me extract value first. Const value login form group dot value. And from this value, I will have the username and I will have the password. So when I click on this should happen. I will subscribe, but make sure you do the unsubscription as well. Since it's HTTP call, I do not think we need. So in sign in, we will call the authentication method with username and password. Let's see whether it's working first. I have to go to the endpoint. Let me remove. If I hit login, it's a 3000 API auth not found. The method is not found. Let's see why it is not showing. 3000 API is okay. API auth. No, I think the path is wrong in here. Let me go back to the backend and auth controller. Okay, the post in here, the post method has another URL. That means not only auth, you have to say auth /login. So I need to add that into my authentication service while I am accessing from the front end. Okay, let's try it again. And you can see that I am unauthorized to do that. Why is that? It is sending unauthorized because I am sending a username and a password which does not have in our backend. It is hard-coded values. You can see. If I go to the user service find one, these are not the values that we are looking for. So we will have to, we will just create a dummy user out of these variables. So we are like doing something like we are incorporating these things. And what is the password again? So, right. So I will have that. Not in here. Not in here. In our dummy backend. Okay. Now if I hit login, you can see that it is getting a success payload. That means we successfully logged in. If I change something in here, the username, it won't work, right? It's say unauthorized. That is expected. So basically what we have done is we have created a dummy section in here and we have dummy users and we are connecting those dummy users via authentication service. So the problem with this authentication service and everything is we are not using a JWT token to return or something like that. We have to implement that. So I think next part of this code is like introducing the JWT token generation. So we will generate token rather than looking at okay kind of thing. So right now, when we hit login, so let me refresh. And if I hit login, now you can say, okay, it is sending okay. If I look back, the payload that I'm getting back, this is the payload that I'm sending. This is the payload that the response that I'm getting. The user ID and the username is given back to me. Okay, so in authenticated framework, in a token-based authentication, we can't do that. We need to return access token for this. So we'll be using JWT access token in order to generate a token. Okay, we'll see how we can do that. Pretty simple. We have to install this JWT. So rather than sending our username and password, username and the user ID, we will generate a token and the token will be sent back to the user. And for further communications that we are doing, the token is the one that we're going to be using. Okay, without the token, it should say unauthorized. All right, let's see how we can get the token in place. In the authentication service, we have the user service as well as something called JWT service, which is coming from the next JWT section. So I will add that under authentication service. Okay, make sure you do not get tangled in backend and frontend. So this one is for the backend. All right. Oops, I need to import it in here. So I will use the JWT service to generate tokens rather than sending back. Right now, you can see I'm sending back the results. And I do not want to do that. Sorry. So if the password is, the logic is same, and we will create a payload of something like this. Payload is what going to be signed on. So sub is one of the what we call a subject, and username will be the username that we are getting from this user. Okay, and this is the payload that we're gonna convert into a JWT token. So the JWT token will have the body section at least with the sub of the user ID and the username of the user. Okay, rather than sending back the unusable token. So I will return something like this. Okay, so so I don't need this old way of doing this. Oh, sorry. So I will return a variable called access token, and using the async method, this JWT service will will sign my payload. Okay, sign my payload and send it back to me. Let's see whether it is working. And I will go to the Legro in here. Login gives me an error. Probably this API is not working. Yeah, need a change. What is the wrong? Okay, JWC is export from a separate module. Okay, so since we are using JWT service, we need to import it, I think. Import the JWT module. Okay, let's see whether it's working. Okay, yes. Now, if I refresh and hit login, it's giving me a 500 data. Probably the configuration is not done correctly. Let's go find out here. The secret key must have a value. The secret private key must have a value. That means when we are configuring the JWT module, we need to configure a secret which we'll use to sign our payload. Okay, this is something we should keep secret. That's why it's called secret key. So if you don't have that secret key, we can't use the JWT signing service. That's because the signing should happen based on that signing key that they are asking for. Okay, this is asking for secret or private key. We need to provide either one of these things. So if you are super into generating this stuff, a public key and private key is asymmetric public key private key generation should happen, and you can use that. But if you're starting something small, you will just use a secret key that's like 1 2 3 or whatever, or something very strong that no one can break it. Okay, so we have to have authentication. They are probably this is the secret key that they are thinking. Do not use this value. Instead, create a complex secret key and keep it set outside of the source code. So this thing should not even be within our source code. If somebody has found this secret key, what will happen is they can access the system and unlock everything, and the user will be exposed. So we have, since we are not that concerned about at this stage, but we can like have this in a separate file, and while we are developing, we can read that, or you can have it in a in the environment variable file, but you do not add that variable file in your GitHub repository. keep it a template. Do not add the exact values. Okay. So JWT module, we have to do the registration thing in here. You guys can see that we have just JWT module. Okay. So that is not how it's gonna work. So we will have a secret. So I will say super secret. Okay, this is not the way you should do. It's against, but for demonstration purpose, we'll just use that. And signing option while we are signing, and the token will expire on 60 seconds. That means after 60 seconds, the token will expire. That means the validate the token that we generated will no longer work. That means the backend will say, okay, the token that you have provided has expired. You are not authorized anymore. Okay. So keep the access token lifetime short, but if you're using something like OAuth2 or something like that, where it has something called refresh token, we keep the refresh token very high and access token very low. That's kind of the mechanism that we do. But in this scenario, I will just say I'm okay to have a 60-second frame, but after 60 seconds, the system will not allow you to use those things. So right now I have a 60-second, and let me go back and see whether I am getting a token correctly. Okay, login get success. Now you guys can see I got an access token based on my payload. So this one is base 64 encoded. If you want to see the content, just copy this code, make sure the quotations are not there. Go to JWT.io. This is like a place where we go to see whether the token generation is completed or not. So by default, they have encoded JWT token, and if I paste it in here, I have extra one here. You guys can see the payload that I have put. The sub username is included in the payload data. If you guys need to know about the JWT token, it's a complete different thing. Right now, it's contained a header, payload, and a signature. So these three elements are differentiated with a dot. Okay, this is the header, this is the body, this is the secret or signature, sorry. And once the body is the one we provided with the payload. You guys can remember we gave the sub and we gave the username. These are like incorporated when we are using the expiry, when we give the signing option as 60 seconds. So these things are generated and added for us. Okay, so this token is a valid token, and this should be used in our application in upcoming request. Otherwise, I mean, at least the endpoints that we have secured, these should be used. Okay, if we have not secured our APIs, this is not going to be something that we can use. Okay, so we need to come up with a way to secure application. Now, I think we are getting an access token. That is good. And we will create something called a guard. Okay, so the guard is where we will have jurisdictions, or we will have some restrictions. If you do not have access token, you are not allowed to go. This kind of thing. We are using something called guard right now. I mean, even with the guard or not, you can go in the go there, and it's gonna work, right? So we have this token. We need this token to be stored in our machine, in our computer. For upcoming requests, this access token should be added as a header token. Okay, so we'll first of all, any questions up until where we got the access token? Out of order. Okay. All right. So we created an access token. Now what we have to do is we need to first we need to store this somewhere. Otherwise, what will happen is in the front end, you will not able to add this into somewhere else. So there are few options. So this access token should not go away after you store this in after you get authenticated, right? So the recommended place is for securing something like this is called HTTP cookies. Like HTTP cookie is like a place where is more secure than the local storage, and most of the things that we do with HTTP, it's like a session-based one. So once the HTTP connection is broken or the cookie is expired, you will no longer have the authority, or you don't have the access to this token. Then the token will get securely disposed. If you have this in local storage, I have seen some videos where people get hijacked the access token from the local storage. So we do not need to I do not recommend putting this in local storage, but the HTTP cookie would be a better place. But in this scenario, I will just store it in a very easy way that I have found using the storage NGXS state management software that we have. It provides us a storage mechanism out of the box, so I'm going to use this. The reason, as I mentioned, this token is needed throughout the application in order to get the details from the backend. Otherwise, it won't work. All right. So yeah, first we will store this token. So the token storage should happen in the front end because the backend is issuing the tokens. We need to keep it safe. So we go to services, authentication service. Now you guys can see it is returning, and the authentications happen without an issue. So I would not recommend this approach, like from directly to the login. Directly to the login, we are calling the authentication service. The service call is done in here. So in order to avoid this, what we do is we create a state for this. This will be state managed. So the state will do all the calls to the API services. So let's create that first. So we have the state. Right now we have only app actions. So I will use the same action to create a login. So I will create a new action. I will call this login. Okay, this is the login, and what we'll have on login is what we'll get a public username, and it's going to be type of string, and a public password. It's going to be a type of string. So this is the action that I'm going to trigger. Okay, so this action will be triggered with a username and a password. So let me trigger that action rather than depending on the service. Okay, I will remove the service. I will create an action to dispatch new login. Okay, so in order to log in, you need to have a username and a password, just like we are doing in here, but we do not have the state in here. So we have a login action. Now the login action is performed. When we perform the login action, somebody should react on that. The action should be executed. What we need to do. So what we can do in here is write a function to execute that action. So the action will be add action login. Okay, make sure you update it in there, and we import the login action. Right now, I'm gonna copy paste this one and use it in here. State model is same, but the action is gonna different. It's gonna have a username and it's gonna have a password. I'm gonna be using that. Right now, what we will do is now we have the username and password. We need to send it to via a service. Now, service injection should happen in the state management. So I will go in here and create a constructor, and it will be private user. What was that? What service, right? What's this? Service. Okay. Now we have injected the authentication service. Now we can create return this auth service. Auth service. Sign in. Sign in is the username and password. Username and password. There you go. So we just remove the login component rather than using the service directly. We are dispatching a login action. The login action will do the service call. Okay, now we have introduced a man in the middle, or the state in the middle. Okay, so what will happen? It should work as normal. The access token should be get generated. Now what we need to do, when the access token is coming back, we need to store it in our state. Right now, if you go to the application, and if you go to this is not, yeah. So right now you can see the local storage section of our application is not having anything else. Okay. So what we will do is we will save our state, what the current state, in our local storage. So in order to do that, we have a simple ng access plugin. We call that storage plugin. Plugin. So basically, what it does is it's gonna whenever we do a change in our state, the storage plugin will store it in our local storage. We can change it from local storage to something else, but for this demonstration and most use cases, storage for local storage is pretty much enough. Okay, and I will pause it. So this is additional thing. If you want to save the storage, save this in the save the state in the storage. Okay. What I'll do is I will go to the main.ts app config. First, I will update in the storage plugin module, and I will have import from statement, and I will say for root, and I don't need this configuration. Okay, so we need to initialize the ng access plugin, otherwise it will not work. What's over here? When I get force. So what will happen is now the storage plugins kick in. Now, when we have the application, if I refresh right now, so the local storage is, let me check. Okay, you can see that when I initiate something, the state gets saved, the loading thing is fails. Now if I refresh again, and it is going to be the same thing. So our state will be saved in our local storage. So by using the same logic, what I will do is I'll take the login component, go to the login module and sign in method. And rather than having a loading as a state, I will take something like access token. So what I'm basically doing in here is I am taking, I am trying to store the access token in the app state model. Okay. So I can do something like this with the pipe operator, and I will tap and I will get the data dot. So I will first I will do a patch operation, patch state. Okay, in the patch state, I will say access token will be coming from d dot access underscore token. So this is the data that is coming from the backend. Okay, so it's the sign in method. It's gonna return an access token for us. Okay, we can even model it. For now, I'll model it in here, but for better thing, you have to move it into the model section. Right now, I will just export it access token response. Okay, it's going to be an interface. It will have an access underscore token type of string. So I will say when I'm returning with this one, I will say observable access token response. But when I'm posting, I need to say return type will be access token response. So in here, d dot access to should be token access token. Okay, make sure this name is same as the one that we are getting from the backend. Now what I'm doing is when I get the authentication server sign in, I will pass the username and password. If I get a correct sign in, okay, I will tap the stream. That means I'm gonna just listen to the stream, and it will have an access token. We call it d.access token. So if I can thanks.d, and I can say access token, something like this. So I will extract the access token field, which is coming from the response. Okay, I will rename this response. So makes it much easier. So from the response, I will take the access token and I will patch it in my state. Okay, state is patched. That means this one is updated. Let's see whether it is happening. Right now, in my local storage, I have only uploading false. If I hit sign in, and now you guys can see the access token is get saved in the local storage. Even though if I refresh, the state keep a track on the access token and the state of the last time that I was working with. So the access token is currently in here. Okay, so right now what I have done is I have sent the access token to the authentication service, and when I'm getting back, I have patched the access token to my state. Okay, now state is updated with the access token. Let me remove this for once. I can clear the state. Now you guys can see there is nothing. As soon as I hit login, access token will get from the backend. Once it is there, the access token will be saved in my state, and the state, since I have a plugin installed, it will save in the local storage. Okay, if you do not have that plugin, if you do not want to control that plugin, you can directly write that something in local storage, or my recommendation is use something like the cookie. Okay, so this cookie is where you should like save the access token, because Once the cookie is invalidated, you can invalidate your token as well. And the HTTP cookie is only accessible by the browser itself. So you are like really secured in that manner. Okay. For now, we will just use the local storage. Okay. I think it's getting too much tense. So I will give you guys some time to breathe in and practice these things before I come next time. Or even better, if you guys can follow up along the authentication section right along. Okay, all you have to do is now get this access token as an interceptor. Okay, interceptor value, and each and every request this will be going on. And you can have these authentication guard in here in the backend, so you can guard your endpoints. Okay, so I'll give you guys some breathing room. Not gonna cover everything today. Almost time is up. Any questions up until this, guys? I know it's a lot. I talk too fast today. Even I want to move progress very much as possible. If you don't understand this one go, that is fine. Okay, I am talking. I'm talking about these things with experience that I have. So if you don't understand this first go, that is fine. Any questions on the screen that you guys need to ask? Okay, let me stop recording.